introduce you the great photography's ear. It's Erik Castro, photojournalist since 1990s. His work is published in the Press Democrat and the San Francisco Chronicle. And he's going to present today his most recent work, The Story of the Couple of the Homeless. Great news is I heard from him the last week that his project of this is the Press Democrat entered the Pulitzer Prize. So I wish we hear the very good news in the later on. Okay? And then today's presentation, the photograph, some of the photograph we exhibit in the art gallery, the Dolly Library, till 14th. So you can stop by, see actually his print work. And then today we have an opening reception at 4 o'clock at the gallery, so you are welcome. And then if you like to talk to him or you have a question, please use that time. 4 o'clock, he'll be there, opening receptions. Today's schedule is we spend maybe 45 minutes his presentation and less than 15 minutes answer the questions. So if we couldn't finish your answer the questions, still you have a time to come to the opening reception. Today is 4 to 6 in the art gallery. Okay, so please welcome to the Erik Castro, today's presenter.
Gold check. Hiroshi, thanks so much. Thanks for having me. This is a huge opportunity for me to really explain what it's like to follow a homeless couple for a year and a half. This wasn't a project that I ever thought I would be doing in my career. And even when I started the project, I had so many doubts that, first of all, anybody could put up with me for that long and have a camera in their face for 14 months, but also reveal their life to me with such detail and such openness as this couple, Michelle and Steve Singleton, that I met on Valentine's Day in 2017. I was like a lot of everybody in Santa Rosa. I was, I've been here for about 10 years. I moved from Austin, Texas with my wife and child. And I just kind of watched the city kind of grow and having all these growing pains that lots of mid-sized cities in California have been having. And especially with homeless, it just seemed to keep growing and growing to the point where it felt out of control. And so it was late 2016, and I was seeing article every day about homeless. But I kept seeing like the same image. I kept seeing that photo that we all see of the guy, under blankets, or the guy sleeping on cardboard, or the woman passed out in a building, in an entrance to a stairwell. And I just kept thinking, like, how do you learn anything about that person if that's the only photos you see? If that's all you know about that person? I remember I opened the page one day and my wife was there, and there was a picture of a guy crashed out on, I think it was in the lobby of the post office. And I told my wife, and I'm like, you know what, they should title that photograph? Human Garbage. Because that's the way I see it. It looks like trash to me. It doesn't look like a human being. I'm like, if that's all you know, how are you gonna make any intelligent choices on even scraping away at this problem? So I went downtown, and this was now February 14th. I went walking downtown, and underneath Highway 101, there was just tents everywhere. And it was just packed, and it was just, everybody was talking about this issue. And I just went to look. I thought, it's probably gonna take me a few months to find somebody to photograph, because my intent was to photograph at least 5 or 6 months. And when I got there, I saw this really sick woman lying on the ground, and she was crying. I don't know why I'm so emotional about this, but it felt cruel. And so I went to see what was wrong with her, and she said, I'm sick, I'm hurting. And I was like, I can't do anything for you. I'm a photographer. What do we do? I'm not a doctor. And then this guy here came running at me, screaming at me. You know, get the hell away from her. What are you doing here? What do you look, what you got that camera on your face? You got to take a picture of her? And it was Steve Singleton. And we ended up spending the whole day together. I got this guy's life story. I mean, hours. And he introduced me to his wife, Michelle. And I told him, you know, I'm here to try to do a documentary project on a homeless couple. And he thought it was crazy. But he spent so much time with me that he thought it might be a great opportunity for him and his wife to tell their story. So the following day, literally the following day, I was photographing them. It was 24 hours, and I was thinking, like, you know, like I said, 4 or 5 months. But I ended up spending 14 months with this couple. I don't know how they dealt with it. I mean, it's easy for me. I go home, I got a nice life, I got kids, you know, I eat well, I drink nice wine. They have to live this life. They're kind of stuck in it, you know. They got these felonies, they've got this horrible background, and they were just stuck in this life. But they let me in, you know, they let me in. And I called the piece Broken. And I'd like to play you this clip I made. It's 30 seconds of the entire 14 months.
Goddamn one of us, I don't care who you ask, because I've asked that question 150 million times, I bet, that one of us want to be homeless. It's just one of the things what they call a setback, or whatever you want to call it. I call it hell.
And that's a great line, Steve's last line there, you know. So people call it a setback. I call it hell, and that's literally where I found them. Those first few weeks under Highway 101 and 5th Street. This was the most important photograph I took in the project. This was taken about 2.5 weeks after I met them. I'd spent so much time already with them that people recognized me downtown when I was walking around with my camera, and they had literally been hiding inside a Highway 101. I didn't know they were there, but another homeless man saw me walking around with my camera and said, "You must be looking for Steve and Michelle." So he's like, I'll take you to where they are. And there's this big metal door on the side of Highway 101 behind the mall. And at this time, it wasn't padlocked, it was open. And so I remember I walked into this dungeon, was completely black except for this sliver of light that was coming through the top. As soon as I entered this space, I remember just hearing this ocean sound, this whoosh, and it was the cars that were zooming above us. It took me a while to get my eyes adjusted, so I started climbing around on the hillside. It was literally a 45-degree angle hillside. It was real powdery and soft. It smelled like mustard and mushrooms, I remember. And I got to the top of the hillside, and Steve and Michelle were asleep in their tent. This was only my 3rd week with them, and they were already impressed with the fact that I was determined to find them and document their life. But the picture was important to me because this was Michelle just exiting her tent, but it felt like the way it felt like to be around them those first few weeks. I felt claustrophobic when I was with them. I felt enclosed, or that I was being buried alive. I felt just completely isolated from the rest of Santa Rosa, you know, the rest of California. And this image of Michelle coming out felt like that to me. And I remember I showed this picture to my photo editor not long after I took it, and I told him, this is the kind of project I'm trying to produce. This is what I want to show people about being homeless. I want to show what it feels like inside their heads, not so much just what it looks like, but what it feels like inside. But I spent those first few weeks under 5th Street, and I just felt like I was just surrounded by asphalt. Like everything around me was cement. The first sort of realization that I picked an interesting couple was that there was a woman, and there was a woman subject that I thought was really important. And it was the reason why I ended up choosing Steve and Michelle. I wanted a woman's perspective. mainly because I felt that the dangers of being on the street would be different for a woman, and in this sense they were. This was about 3 weeks, yeah, about that same time I took that other photo, and another homeless man had sexually threatened Michelle a few weeks before the project began. He came by their camp just to check up on some friends, and every time Michelle heard that he was nearby, she just became rigid and just engulfed in fear. And this is a picture of this baseball bat they used to carry during this period. Anytime the guy would come around, they would hold it up, and they would prepare to fight, and Steve would prepare to defend Michelle. It was sort of just my entryway into this couple's life, you know. It's a volatile couple. This is a couple that kisses each other and loves each other, but this is a couple that fought constantly too. They were intense in everything they did. But this picture to me really showed the danger of being homeless. I know lots of the public are fearful of homeless, but the homeless are also scared of you guys, of the threats that come to them. But like I said, this was like a city of cement that they lived in. And these are early pictures in the project. I was really just trying to get to know them, their personalities. I thought this was going to be a story of a couple, but it's really a story of two very distinct people that had an extraordinary last year together. They would end this year with a horrible breakup, but they would have both two extremely life-changing developments during this year. You know, Michelle was this very stoic, quiet woman, intense. She wasn't working at the time, she was very depressed. But she carried herself with a lot of dignity. She was always very clean. When I would go around her tent, she would be cleaning the streets all the time with a broom. She would look, if she would see a cigarette butt, she would eyeball it, and she would just go right to it, and she would pick them up. She was like meticulously clean. You know, Steve was the same way. Steve had this thing about dirt and about always showing his best, and he was very difficult to be around sometimes because he was always arguing with people about their behavior. But he was an interesting guy. He is a very thoughtful person. He can be a real hothead, but he's a bright person. He's got 2 older sons that are successful. He was in a marriage that ended poorly. He had lots of surgeries while he was growing up as a young father, and he got addicted to a lot of drugs, and that pulled him into that lifestyle. But he was homeless for so many years. I never was ever really sure to figure out how many, somewhere between 15 and 20, that his kids actually lived the homeless life with him. And we got to meet his oldest son later in the project, his oldest son, Chad. But what I was really trying to do with this project was to bring people into these moments that you just couldn't see unless you were invited. This wasn't on Fifth Street. This was behind a cemetery, way up in the Hidden Valley neighborhood, behind all this shrubbery. You had to be invited to this space, and I had to be invited to this moment. This was right after Steve tore his rotator cuff. Again, the guy hates dirt, the guy hates mud, and it was raining this week. And so he was determined to build a platform under his tent with some stolen pallets that he got from a construction site. While the pallets were falling, he'd reached over to grab one, and it tore his rotator cuff. And this was just a few days after. He was in such pain that Michelle had to dress him like a child this morning. I felt so humiliated for Steve because he's such a macho guy, you know. I stick up for my wife. I'll kick anybody's ass that messes with her, you know. But here he was this morning being dressed like a child. She even tied his shoes for him. You know, I went everywhere with them, and I documented everything they did. This was that same area behind the Shenate cemetery. Their tent actually is here. You can't see it because they built this intricate canopy. I mean, they literally were nest building. And again, the emphasis was on aesthetics. Michelle turned that canopy into like a floral arrangement. She was picking the most beautiful flowers she could find, and she was interwoven them throughout this canopy to hide their tent. They had been for months in downtown, and so this was a respite for them. They were so relieved to find this spot. And I really felt for them, and it was so beautiful. When I arrived for my first time photographing them, there was literally a deer just about 15 feet away from me nibbling on leaves. And I told Michelle, it reminds me of the Garden of Eden here. But like I said, the rains came and turned this place into just a muddy hell for them. And that's when Steve had his horrible injury. But while they were here, you know, I was really able to kind of learn about who they were. There wasn't the chaos of being downtown anymore. There wasn't people screaming at them, fights going on, or pit bulls owners fighting with each other. It was just insane being down there on Fifth Street. It was hard to interview them. I just would photograph them. But here they had time to kind of settle in on their thoughts. This morning, Michelle was telling me about her mother who had passed away when she was 7. She died of cancer, and it's been this wound, you can tell, in Michelle, because it came out over and over through the project. This morning, she started to cry because she was telling me that she was starting to forget her mother's face. She was telling me, I'm forgetting what it feels like, or I'm forgetting what it looks like. And that's why I took that photo. I just feel we all can relate to these moments, you know. We all have aging parents, some of us have maybe gone through this already. And these are the kind of moments I was trying to show the public. You know, these are human beings. And the story became less about being homeless and more about just 2 people, you know. You know, I'm not a homeless expert. I'm not here to explain that I am. I'm here to really just tell this story of this couple. This was Steve in the doctor's office dealing with his wound, his torn rotator cuff. He was like that lion with that thorn in his paw. And this injury plagued him throughout the entire project. It just overwhelmed him. It took him out of his job. You know, it made him feel really vulnerable. And like I said, Steve's a macho guy. He hates that. This was actually when they were living right across the street from the Memorial Hospital. They were camped out by the creek. I used to love to photograph these moments because Steve would go, you know, he'd put on his pajamas, get out of his tent, put on his sneakers, and then he'd walk across the street to the hospital. When they would do this, they never told anybody they were homeless. They never did. I never ever heard him say that. The woman was really sweet. I think her name was Siobhan, and Steve's a real chatter guy. So they chatted and went back and forth. She had no idea that he just walked across the street from a homeless tent, you know. And you could tell he really loved those moments. He loved being treated just like anybody else, you know. The woman asked what I was doing. I just said, Steve's got an interesting life, so I'm photographing him. I never revealed that they were homeless to people. That was my line. They just have interesting lives. But to me, he always looks so vulnerable in this image. It almost looks like a morgue picture to me when I took this. I remember thinking, we're all headed that way. We're all headed to more visits to the hospital, all of us. And this is something we can all relate to. But Steve was incredibly industrious. He was always working, even though he didn't have a job. He had a job when I met him, but he lost it after his injury. But he was always doing things with his hands. He built these intricate cabins, and I spent about 3 hours photographing him, and at one time putting down my camera and actually helping him. I remember at one point I told him I feel like I'm a little kid, you know, helping his dad in the garage. He had tools, he had measuring tapes, he had levelers, and he built this intricate cabin for Michelle, he was saying. You know, he had these platforms, he lit it with solar lighting. I mean, they were these solid pieces of construction. He put so much effort into being homeless. I mean, this is a guy that should be a contractor, I kept thinking in my head. I never spoke to Steve that way during our project. I was always very friendly to him, but I always tried to restrain what I would say to him. I never gave him advice. I never gave either of them advice, but I listened to them all the time. I mean, I had so many conversations on my porch at night. One of them would call me or text me, you know, and bitch about their day, talk about what was going on downtown, or tell me where their new place was. And they would give me, after a while, it was a game to them. We'll tell you kind of where it is, and we'll see if you can find it. But the most important things that I was trying to do is I was trying to take pictures like this. This was about 6 months into the project. They had been so fed up with being pushed out of downtown, pushed out of the Sinead area. They just kept getting pushed. So finally they went way out to Williside Road, outside of the Santa Rosa City districts. and settled in with those cabins. By this time, they were so used to me that this was actually the first time I went inside the tent. I would always photograph into the tent, but I'd never been inside of it. I had asked Michelle earlier if she'd mind if I walked into her tent that morning, and she said, no problem. So I took off my boots, and she was really stressed out. She had just started her new job at the fairgrounds as a security guard. She was commuting 7 miles back and forth from that location on her bike. But to me, this picture was so important. I wanted the public to be inside the tent with them without the awareness of the photographer, just Michelle and the viewer. I mean, I spent so much time with Michelle. She used to drive me crazy because she's an intense woman, and she expects everything from you. She expects the best out of you, both of them. In fact, when I started the project, Steve said, the only reason we were doing it is because we think it might change somebody's mind. And I told him, I couldn't promise you that. But Steve said, you know what? There's one thing that you have to do for us. You have to do the best work you can do. I've never had a subject sort of put that challenge on me. But I thought that was true. I said, you know what? Yeah, exactly. I have to. If you're going to let me into a moment like that, I better hell get that photograph right. I better be in the moment. I better have not anything in my head except what's happening in your life. And that's what I did for 14 months. I lived this project. I drove my family and friends absolutely insane. My brother just stopped answering my calls. My brother's a journalist. He was a reporter, and he was a cops reporter. And he was really the only guy I would go to all the time when I had something sticky that was going on with this project that I was unsure about. You know, because I was really involved with these lives. This was Missy, their puppy. They got a little pit bull that they got from a friend that was in another homeless camp. Missy is an adorable dog, but a dog that takes responsibility, that needs money to feed, that needs care, that needs effort. And this is the photo of how they both felt about that dog. Michelle, of course, adored Missy, and it was her solace, somebody she could hold at night. And for Steve, it was, we can barely take care of ourselves. Why do we have a dog? And in fact, this dog kept him out of a house. They got an offer for an apartment for $600 a month. It was a room in a beautiful house, actually near that campsite out in Willowside Road. They didn't take it because the person didn't take dogs. And I remember when that happened, I told Steve, I don't buy that. Because you hate that dog. What do you mean you're going to lose the place for the dog? And that's when I learned about Steve's anxiety problem. He's like, yeah, the dog was only part of the problem. When I go inside apartments, I go nuts. I start sweating. My heart races. He's like, I don't know if I'll ever be able to live inside again. But the one thing that this two always showed throughout the entire project was their compassion for other people, especially other homeless people. This was Vinny. Vinny was a guy that was living in Homeless Hill. I'd never been out to Homeless Hill, but Steve used to say it's the nastiest homeless camp he'd ever been there. He used to say it smells like death there, and that he would never choose to live there. Well, one day Vinny got very ill and was in the hospital, and he had asked some friends to buy him some Chinese food, but nobody brought it to him. And Steve and Michelle were incensed when they heard that. How can they let a sick homeless guy not get some Chinese food? That's what they were telling me. So they went out to Panda Inn, and they bought lunch for themselves, and they bought lunch for Vinny, and they brought him in, you know, on the way there, you know. Before they left, I had asked us, do you mind if I join you? And the answer was yes, 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 always yes. They never said no. Wherever they went, yes, of course you can come, Eric. Of course you can photograph. But it was a really emotional visit. Again, these two sat and just talked to this guy, you know. What do you need to be done if you don't make it? What do you want us to do? We know you got your pit bull puppies. We'll help you give them away. You know, they chatted about stuff like that. But for Michelle, again, it was the mother. The mother thing came up. She started shaking and weeping and holding on to her lunch. And I asked her, what's going on? And she's like, my mom, when she died of cancer, it was just like this. And she goes, but the thing that pissed me off is they wouldn't let me see her. And I had to stay in the lobby. She goes, I'll never forget. I crawled under the table in the lobby. Tough photo to take. Every once in a while I take a photo and I'd say, you know, I tell her why. I'd say, I said, people have to know I said, people have to know that you feel this way and that you're willing to endure this much pain to help somebody. That's what I told her. Because it's quiet in there and the camera's just click, click, you know. I mean, it's jolting. It's jolting. I wanted her to understand why I was taking that photo. It's so important, I thought. That's what you're willing to endure to help somebody. That's a lot of compassion to show. You know, and Steve, like I said, Steve's the aggressor. You know, this looks like he's going to beat somebody up. I took him out for a coffee. It's about the most I ever did to them. You know, I never felt it was something I should do, give them money or stuff like that. But I did take them out for coffee, help when we interviewed sometimes. We were walking back from coffee one day, and there was a guy sleeping in front of this house. And Steve was like, you know, he can't do that. Can't do that. It's going to make us all look bad. Everyone's going to think we're drunks. So he went to the guy and pleaded with him, you know, got to get up. You can't sleep here. You can't do this. The kids are getting out of school in a couple hours. They're going to walk here. They're not going to want to walk over a homeless man. And so he's telling this guy, go to my tent. You could sleep there and the police won't bother you. This was about a 5-minute moment, but boy, was it intense. I mean, it was part, you know, of Steve being angry at everything that the way the public perceives him, and he was kind of taking it out of this guy. But at the same time, it was Steve saying, you know, come on, I'm here to help you. He was like, I'm just like you, he said. I'm just like you. I live on the streets just like you. Come to my tent, sleep it off. And it was a remarkable moment. The guy never got up, and Steve went back to his tent. I remember he sat down, it started to rain, and Steve was just like, you know, he doesn't understand. If he stays out there and he's drunk, it's going to kill him. But these were things I was trying to show you about who these people are, you know. They're tough moments to photograph, but I just found them so important. I found them so revealing about how complicated this lifestyle really is. But the one thing I did a lot with them was like, I went at night with them when they collected cans and bottles. It was really their play money, their cigarette money, their pot money. They ate out a lot. They loved to eat out. They loved to buy food. Steve cooked a lot. Steve cooked all the time. He made like the best French toast I'd ever seen one day. I mean, he was a great cook. And these nights were just amazing because these were, again, these moments of just complete isolation from the rest of Santa Rosa, like I said. I just felt lost when I was with them. Just felt outside of the box, you know. But everything was meticulous and professional. I mean, she always had her gloves. She always had her light. They never made a mess. They were always respectful. If they found garbage in the recycle bin, they would move the garbage to the right bin. Some people left them wrapped up plastic bottles because the routes were so regular that they expected Michelle and Steve to come by. You know, during the project, my garbage is picked up on Wednesday morning, so Tuesday night, I'd hear Steve sometimes on my street. I'd get up and in my pajamas and I'd go out and talk to him for a bit. I mean, that's how routine this work was. But again, it just felt so lonely and isolating, you know. All you heard was the little rumble of the plastic bottles. the whispers between Steve and Michelle. They spoke very quietly. And then if the work went too late, they would nap somewhere in town. They napped across the street from Stark's this night, the restaurant Stark's. There's a row of redwoods there, and they napped behind the redwoods, as their bike route at that time was the 7-mile bike route. And they had collected about 10 or 12 bags of aluminum and plastic. But this is about the time when I realized that Michelle was really out, leaving Steve. She was joining the rest of the community. This was early in her job, and the first time I went out there, I didn't even recognize her. I told her that. I'm like, I couldn't even find you in the crowd. I mean, she held her head up high. She was chatting with everybody. She was joking. She was laughing. She loved it. She just blossomed in this job. She became a completely different person to me. But I love this image because she really was. She really just blended into the crowd, and she loved that. Again, she never told her coworkers she was homeless. She never told the people around her. Nobody knew that. She loved that. She would tell me, she goes, it's none of their business anyways that I live in a tent. I just want to be treated like everybody else. And this was a remarkable thing to watch. And she commuted everywhere. This job was in Daly City. She was working in San Francisco. She was working in Sausalito. She had a coworker that would drive her to these jobs. Her coworker would drive her to the tent, pick her up, and then drive her to the job. They'd work a 12-hour shift and then drive her back to the tent that night. It was amazing. But again, you know, like fixing the tie, listening to her boss on her CV, you know, just always professionalism, always aware of her appearance. And she took her job so seriously, and she loved it. And that's when I just started watching her move out of that life. She was leaving. That was her favorite actor. This was at the Dickens Fair. This was her favorite job all year. And she fell in love with everybody, all the actors there, and they all loved her. They all knew her name, and some gave him gifts, but she loved this actor who played Jacob Marley. He did play a kick-ass Jacob Marley. But I probably shot 10,000 photos of Michelle. And I think I got 3 where she's smiling, and 2 of them are at work. I mean, it really was life-changing. It really gave her the confidence to leave Steve. It was a relationship that was too contentious. And she had talked about it, that there had been abuse. I'd never witnessed it, but she had talked about it to me. They both revealed a lot to each other about each other, and I tried to keep that apart. I never told Steve what Michelle said, and I never told Michelle what Steve would say. I just kind of internalized it. It wasn't my place to become a more nuisance than I really was to these couple, you know. But that was Martina. Martina really was the friend for Michelle, the real sort of angel that had the apartment that would let Michelle crash there and flip through Marabella magazines, take a shower, you know, and drive her to all her jobs. I mean, Martina is a saint. She really cared about her friend. The first time I met Martina, that was what she said. Got to get these 2 people off the street. That's what she said. She even put up with Steve. Steve can be a handful. But this is Michelle. I remember telling my brother this. I'm like, I feel like I'm around a talented actress. She's this hard, cold prisoner at the homeless camp that if you cross her path, she will rip your head off. And then she's this elegant, polite, well-dressed, well-kept woman who loves her job and loves to play on the phone and drink her vanilla lattes. It was such an extraordinary thing to watch. Watch somebody lead this double life, you know? I remember thinking, like, next time I buy a ticket at a theater or go to a concert, I'm going to wonder, does that guy live in a tent? She live in a tent? You can't tell with Michelle. But oh my God, were they in court a lot. Being homeless is like ticket hell. They were always getting trespassing tickets, always fighting for tickets. And this is exactly what it felt to be in court. You could see it in Michelle's face. That's her court-appointed attorney. She got a job after the fires in the fire zone, and the cop didn't believe she was really a security guard. So they searched her. She had some pot, she had some pipes. So she got busted. She got taken to jail. And she was fighting that case. Oh, I went to so many of these. I felt like I was in court all year with these two. I mean, they were always in court. It's such a humiliating experience. I tell you that, that's probably the time I felt the most humiliated was going to court with them, you know. They let me photograph one. It's really hard to photograph in court. I asked 5 different times, and one judge let me photograph. That's how I got this photo. But every other attempt was denied. And I think that's probably the most important thing to cover, because I think that place was filled with homeless. But all this sort of came down at the end of the year. All these things, her job, the pressure, she was making money. Should she leave Steve? This was actually right after a huge fight. She did leave Steve. She was at Martina's house. She was like, I'm fed up. I got this court case. I can't handle this anymore. And she just broke down in Martina's apartment. You know, this was a really tough moment. It was in my head, I was rooting for her. Just go, Michelle. Go your own way. You can live outside of that. Steve settled in. This was a really tough afternoon. I just really felt for her. But again, I wanted the public to see this. I wanted to see just how complicated, how emotional, and how chaotic this life is, and how individual it is. It's not just homelessness, you know, it's stories. In this sense, it's Steve and Michelle's story. But Steve was really turning homelessness into a profession. He was a professional homeless man. I mean, he looks like one of you right here now. This is at City Hall. He would go every Tuesday because there was a camp in the Rosa neighborhood, and he was fighting for its existence. And so they kind of pushed him into this leadership role. And he was learning on the job. But he really reluctantly took it and felt that I've been doing this for 20 years. I've got something to say. I've got something to teach. And he was pragmatic. These are all, this is a homeless advocate, this is a homeless advocate, and these are just other people waiting for talk. But Steve just had a way of cutting to the chase, you know. The Sonoma County health officials used him as a liaisons in the camps. They were doing STD testing, and they needed people to go test for that. The county guy said nobody would ever talk to them, but when I'm with Steve, everybody will talk. They trust this guy. You know, he's the real deal. If he says you should go get tested, people listen. So he was like, it was becoming a job for him. They had every week, every Saturday at 2, they had this thing called a board meeting at the homeless camp. And all these advocates would stand around and hash out all these problems. And the advocates are great. God, their hearts are in the right place, but their language is so idealistic. And Steve would just like cut in and say, that's really nice, but this is what we have to do today. We just have to figure out this problem with these 5 people. We're not going to solve homelessness today. Let's just figure out the trash problem and get that solved and then move on to something next. And look, this. I have so many photos like this. Each and every one of them, they listen to this guy. He's just so charismatic. And he just cut to the chase. It was really fascinating to watch. I was watching a leader grow and learn. And I had so much hope from him. I'm like, God, this guy really should be in charge. He's got great ideas, you know, but he's so self-destructive. Just doesn't give himself that chance that everybody else was giving him at that time. You know, his tent at that homeless camp was like being in a busy bus station. And people coming in and out, lawyers calling him. There was a lawyer calling him like every other week saying, you know, yeah, I'm trying to fight your case. I'm going to be down in the city. You know, people would have problems with each other. Fights would break out in the camp, and they'd want Steve to solve them. Or somebody would just scream out at him, my propane tank doesn't work. And he'd go out there and fix it. It was like he was part manager, part leader, part homeless advocate. He just had all these roles. And it really just overwhelmed him. I really felt for him too, because I could tell that he wanted to help, but I could tell that this was becoming too much. But the most extraordinary thing this project for me witnessing was his grandchild. You know, to me this then became less a story about a homeless guy, but you know, a grandfather. That's Chad, his son on the right. That's Ellie, his daughter-in-law, and that's probably I think maybe only the second time he had held his grandchild. It was an enormous gift of Chad to let me do this, to let me go into his home and photograph this. This was 3 days before Christmas. It was just Michelle and Steve were invited. And of course, Missy, the dog, even though Ellie doesn't like pit bulls. The dog can come. But I got to watch Steve as a parent and what kind of relationship he had with his son. You know, Steve's the kid. His son's got a great job, nice house. You know, he actually bought a house where he grew up. And so we went out on a walk, and Steve wanted to go on an adventure. Let's go find old neighbors. Let's go talk to people. Let's go hike over here. You know, Chad's got his poodle, and Steve's got his pit bull. Chad's like, we got to go back and eat dinner. Ellie wants us for dinner. And Steve's like, no, she can wait. Well, let's go on our hike. Come on. Yeah, you could see, like, the relationship that they had, you know. And Chad told me that. Chad remembered being homeless. And he used to say, I didn't even realize we were homeless because my dad made it so fun. It was like a game. It was like a game to him. But it was remarkable to witness this, you know. These are the pictures I wanted to show the public. Not the guy under the, you know, under the rags, not the woman asleep on a cardboard, but this. This is something we all can relate to. This tells us something about him. And boy, is he comfortable with infants. That's Brett's feet, that's Steve's hands. And he told me that when Chad was little, he used to sit on the couch with Chad and do the same thing for hours and watch TV, you know. Steve can be a real bullshitter, so I never knew what kind of dad he was. But when he was around Brett, I could tell this guy was a hands-on father, you know. Didn't make the best choices, but boy, does he love his kids. And he didn't give him the best life, and his kids have told me that, but they're very loyal to his father, which I think is extraordinary. I don't know if I can handle a dad like Steve, but his sons are extremely loyal to his father. And in April, they finally, you know, they got housing. I went to go visit them. It was April 2nd. This is 2017, 18. This was 14 months later. And they get a call in their tent saying they got a room at the Palms. And it was an extraordinary thing to witness. Michelle was done. She's like, I'm never going outside again. And Steve was like, Steve, I'm worried. I don't know if I can live in this space. I don't know if I can handle the anxiety. And it didn't last. Yeah, they had a big fight a couple of months after. Huge fight. It got physical. And they broke up, and they have not been together since. But at the end, I wanted to just read you something I wrote about the project and about basically just to give you an idea what it's like to do this. I wrote this piece because these guys had bikes, and the bike was the form of transportation. So after the project came out, I sent out pictures, and I wrote this piece really quickly about them. It's called Bicycles, but I wanted to read it to you. It says, bicycles for Steve and Michelle were absolutely vital to their daily life. The bike was a moving van, a taxi to get to and from a doctor's appointment. It carried Michelle on her 7-mile commute to work while she enjoyed her cigarettes. The bikes hauled their bags of laundry to the laundromat and carried their pit bull Missy like a child wherever they rode, somewhere to eat or somewhere to shower. Most often, their bikes hauled several garbage bags full of plastic bottles and cans they collected sometimes 5 days a week to the late evening hours. But sometimes the bikes just gave them freedom, you know, a freedom to roam. And who doesn't love that? You're going to need a bike if you want to keep up with us, Steve told me about 2 weeks in the project. He even suggested I sell some photographs that were in a gallery at the time and use the money to purchase 2 bikes. You should buy one for your son, you cheap bastard. So I took Steve's advice. So now, on most days around sunset, I ride through the neighborhood with my son, Eli. We both love cats, and we joke that all the neighborhood cats are waking up from their nighttime prowls, and we point them out to each other. It's really hard not to think of my rides pedaling alongside Steve and Michelle every time I get on my bike. And people have often asked, has this project had an effect on you? Well, my sunset rides with my bike has been one effect with meeting Steve and Michelle. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we still have a couple minutes time. If you have any questions, raise your hand, and maybe 2 or 3 questions. If not, again, we have an opening reception at 4 o'clock. Please join us. Yes?
What kind of camera were you using during the time that you were shooting all?
She asked what kind of camera I use. It's just a Nikon D600. It's nothing big. It's small. I mean, I wish I had a smaller camera. I mean, I think cameras are way too big and noisy. And see, told you. So yeah, I mean, it was just, it's not a extremely expensive camera, but it worked. It worked really well. And the strange thing was they never asked to look at photos, ever, which I don't know anybody like that. But so I never, and like, remember I had always said they say yes to photos. They always said yes. There was only one moment in the entire 14 months when they asked me not to take pictures. And it was right after the fires, and Michelle was going back to work, and she was just stressed out. And she was trying to find her clothes. This was on 5th Street. So she was going through her bins on 5th Street, trying to find her outfits and trying to, and she was just stressed. And she heard me, click, 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 click. I wanted to show, like, this is nuts. I mean, she's trying to go to work. She's on 5th Street trying to get ready for her job. And that was the only time she said, Eric, please stop taking photos. And I stopped. But that was the only time. And then later she apologized to me. I'm sorry I was rude to you. She always did that. Both of them. Yeah. Question for Purple?
Do you know where Steve and Michelle are now?
She asked, do I know where Steve and Michelle is now? Yes. Michelle still lives at the Palms. She's still living there. Steve was in jail for a few months after because of the fight, and she got a restraining order. And so he broke it, trying to get back to her. So we went back into the jail. Actually, when this project was released, I worked with the writer on this project the whole time. And the writer and I went into jail and visited him and tried to talk to him about the project, try to prepare him. But yeah, so he's out and he's back on the street. Doing what Steve does.
It would be interesting if they were to see their photos of them in the gallery here.
Yeah, they can't be together because that automatically can put Steve back in jail. So it's complicated right now. I can't, I communicated him a lot after the project ended, a lot, especially right after, because I just wanted to prepare them for all the comments online and stuff. And it was hard for Michelle. Michelle told me straight out after. She's like, this was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. I'm a private person. And I felt for her, you know, I'm like, yeah, I know, I get it. But I just kept, you know, my whole thing was like, it's so important, your story. Like, it's so important. It's so important to see this, and it's so difficult to do this right now. It's just difficult for news journalism in general to do these types of projects. There's just no money for staffers to do this. I'm a freelancer, and it was hard for me to do it, you know. But it's valuable information. Anyone else? Other question? Are you? Did you have your hand? Oh, on the way back there.
I have a question about if you've seen any positive movement between law enforcement and the homeless, and if you maybe have some suggestions on how communities can maybe also implement some type of change within that dynamic.
So the gentleman asked if I'd seen any, they asked me to repeat questions, asked if I'd seen any, you know, changes in police enforcement, or if there's things the community can get involved with. Is that right? Is that
Correct.
Actually, when I started the project, the whole thing was when the homeless were underneath the bridge, the police would come and clean it out every 10 days, and then they all come back again, and then police would come. There was kind of like this strange little dance. Now it just seems like there's just this policy where, like, we're keeping it clear and we're keeping it clean. So it seems a little more aggressive. I don't know. I'm not really, I haven't gotten involved with policy or even tried to invest time into it, but just as a citizen, it seems a little more aggressive. I don't know what the public feels right now. I think they're worn out and fatigued by the issue. It's such a daunting problem. So yeah, I don't know. I wish I had a better answer for you, sir. Any other questions?
Well, I just want to say thank you, because your work has inspired me.
Oh, well, thank you, sir.
Okay, maybe last questions.
Okay. Michelle made a lot of bad choices, and she had been a relationship with a drug dealer, and she told me that the drug dealer got raided one day. She said she opened the door of the apartment she was at, and there was rifles pointed at her face, and she had no money, no place to go. And the cops said, "We don't want you. Why don't you get out of here?" And so she left and went to Sam Jones. And she met Steve there. I don't know precisely how Steve became homeless. I know that he made a lot of poor choices with a lot of his drug use and stuff. So I don't know. And I tried to learn about that, but it was so difficult to even just keep up with this year and turn it into something that people can digest and not be too overwhelmed by, that I didn't spend a lot of time doing it, investigating what their previous life was. I was just confirmed now. And their life was so extraordinary, and it changed so much in that year that I felt like we had too much material to even work with. Yeah. Good question, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We think we need out of the classroom. So please join the opening reception at 4 o'clock in the art gallery. And Eric is here, so you have more questions, ask him to the opening reception. Thank you for coming today.
It's tough. Oh, yeah.